To most people in Merside, Alan Tobin looked like any other man, just another middle-aged dad living in a quiet life in a modest house. He was soft-spoken, he wore secondhand polos, and his neighbors knew him as a former mental health nurse. Dependable, boring even. But while the kids on his street rode their bikes past tidy driveways, Alan Tobin was building one of the largest drug empires Britain had ever seen. At first, there were no signs, no flashy cars, no bodyguards. Alan preferred to move like smoke, unseen. A single phone ping from the wrong number could collapse everything, though. So he played the part. He worked the night shifts, wore his NHS badge, and when the whispers came, those vague rumors about connections, he just smiled. But behind that smile was a man orchestrating a criminal network worth of millions of dollars. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he simply delivered. Everything moved under his watch, and no one, not his coworkers, not his neighbors, not even the police, had any clue. At least, not yet. Alan had discipline, but his younger brother John Tobin had drive. And if Alan was the architect, John was the engine. And together, they were untouchable. The pair operated under aliases on encrypted chat networks. Alan was known as Cape Rocket, and John was known as Slight Drake. Sounds like gamer tags, right? But this wasn't Fortnite. It was a Class A distribution coded in kilos and negotiated in complete silence. Their conversations didn't include threats or the normal turf talk. It was all about logistics, ton level strategy, which courier, what route, and most importantly, what price. When your clients include some of the most dangerous crime groups in the UK, your margin for error is absolute zero. That's why the Tobins had a secret weapon, Robbie the Bear Broughton, a former MMA fighter turned enforcer at 6'1" and nearly 252 pounds, and trained to break bones in silence. The bear wasn't there to talk. He was there to remind people that missing a payment wasn't optional. John kept no records. He handled his business through burner phones and bubble wrap. Literally, his DNA would later be traced to the packaging of cocaine bricks. For now, though, he was just another guy in a tracksuit, driving in a tinted Audi through Liverpool's back streets, quietly supplying the chaos. During daylight, Alan Tobin clocked in like every other NHS employee. His patients knew him as kind, thorough, and always on time. At Merseyside Care Trust, he worked quietly in the background, never making waves, always helpful. No one ever suspected the man discussing schizophrenia treatment plans by day was orchestrating the transport of cocaine by night. It started small, one run here, one introduction there, but as the cash piled up, first hundreds, then thousands, Alan realized something terrifying. Crime was more stable than healthcare, and it paid far better. He wasn't some Scarface wannabe. There were no golden guns or designer suits, just lists, rotations, and a hunger to provide. According to his lawyer, Allen got into this to support his 5 children, but the truth was the numbers told a more compelling story. By 2018, his side hustle had exploded into a full-scale enterprise. Every week, shipments were delivered across the country, packaged with care, labeled discreetly. The NHS never had a clue. He would go home, wash up, eat dinner with his kids, then disappear into back alleys where luxury watches and bulk cocaine were traded like baseball cards. If you looked at a UK map from the air and traced every journey made by the Tobin's runners, you'd see artistries of cocaine, a web stretching from Merseyside to Kent, from Liverpool to London, then looping back north through Cumbria and into Scotland. This wasn't street level stuff. It was logistics, refined, tested, industrial. They didn't deal in ounces, they dealt in tons. Every car had a false floor, every courier had a cover story, and every address used to stash product was rented under fake names. Alan and John didn't get their hands dirty. That was the lieutenants, the kids chasing fast cash, unaware of just how deep into it they really were. Each transport run had layers, one car scouting ahead, one carrying the real load, all coordinated through encrypted phones with codes that made even seasoned detectives scratch their heads a little bit. The Tobins supplied everyone rival gangs, London crews, Welsh outfits. They didn't pick sides, they just moved weight. If someone failed to pay, they sent bear. It was a closed circuit. Supply, movement, payment, repeat. And for years, nothing disrupted this flow. Nothing. Until the police noticed a pattern. Robbie Broughton wasn't a metaphor. He really was a bear. Thick arms, a scarred brow, and cauliflower ears that told stories no court transcript ever could. As an MMA fighter, he learned control, and as the Tobin's debt collector, he learned pressure. And he applied both of these traits with precision. He didn't need to shout, he would just show up. A nod here, a few words there, maybe he'd place a hand on your shoulder, real heavy and slow. You knew what came next if you didn't pay. On one occasion, he visited a shop owner who had fallen behind. The man opened the door, recognized Robbie, and simply handed over a brown envelope. No words exchanged, none were needed. He moved cash, millions in laundered profits between safe houses and drop points. And when necessary, he cleaned up messes. Figuratively, of course. The Tobins didn't like blood on the books. To the public, Robbie was a fighter past his prime. But to the Tobins, he was muscle wrapped in loyalty. For $678,000 missing in a deal gone wrong, he once drove 200 miles without any sleep to make things right. And now, with their empire ballooning, the Tobins relied on him more than they ever had before. By spring 2018, the Tobin operation was humming like a machine, but outside the walls of their network, a different machine was awakening. Cheshire Police had launched Operation Dreadnaught, a covert, relentless investigation aimed at unraveling the silent empire beneath Warrington and beyond. Detectives knew they were up against professionals. The Tobins were careful though. Their couriers used burner phones and changed vehicles constantly. Their communications were encrypted, their cash handled in sealed off garages and in kitchens. But the police were patient. They followed the patterns, not the people. Surveillance teams set up around safe houses. Car registrations were logged. Routes were tracked. Calls were traced. It wasn't about catching someone red-handed. It was about building the whole picture. At one point, officers recovered a phone discarded by one of the Tobin carriers. It seemed like trash until forensics analysts uncovered encrypted video footage. It showed $203,000 in stacked notes and luxury watches, sprawled across a kitchen table. Laughter echoed in the background. Faces were visible. The arrogance was insane. The web was beginning to show its edges. And as more couriers were pulled in, and as more shipments were quietly intercepted, the investigators knew they were close. All they needed now was the big one. August 2nd, 2018 started like any other day for the Tobin operation. A van and a scout car left Kent under the cover of morning haze. Their cargo, 186 kilograms of 90% pure cocaine, concealed beneath specialty-built metal drawers in the van's floor. The value was $27 million. It was the largest shipment they had ever attempted. But this journey was not going unseen. For weeks, the police had been watching. Helicopters silently tracked the convoy overhead. Unmarked vehicles flanked them from afar. The entire route was logged in real time. Every traffic stop, every refueling point, every delay was recorded. As they approached Junction 19 on the M6 near Knutsford, the signal was given. The road was shut. Police cruisers, marked and unmarked, swarmed from all directions. It was over in seconds. No dramatic chase, no resistance. The drivers, James Simpson, Claus Smith, Andrew Daniels, and Dean Brettle, knew the empire had just collapsed. Inside the van, officers found the drugs, wrapped, labeled, and ready for distribution. It was the largest land-based cocaine seizure in British history. The silence of the Tobin operation was broken by sirens and camera flashes. The damage was done, and the clock was now ticking for everyone connected. News of the bust spread like wildfire, not just through police networks, but through the entire underworld. Panic followed. Phones were destroyed. Stash houses were abandoned. Within 48 hours, Operation Dreadnaught triggered simultaneous raids across Warrington and beyond. Alan Tobin was arrested at home. He didn't resist, neither did his brother. But the calm faces they presented during questioning masked the chaos unraveling behind the scenes. Associates fled. Some vanished. Others stayed and hoped they hadn't been named. But it was too late. In retaliation, violence erupted. Old Droid's family was targeted. Shots were fired into his parents' house. His brother's sweet shop was firebombed. A bridal boutique owned by his mother was torched in broad daylight. Police issued Osmond warnings, official alerts that someone's life was in danger. The message from higher up the chain was clear. Someone had to pay for the loss. But the empire was too exposed to recover. Surveillance tapes, call logs, courier confessions. They told the story in painful detail. The Tobins hadn't just lost product, they had lost control. The illusion of power faded with every arrest. And for the first time in years, the streets of Merseyside began to feel just a little bit quieter. Liverpool Crown Court became the stage for a drug empire's dismantling. One by one, the key players were brought before the judge. The prosecution laid out a case so detailed, so methodically constructed, it left very little room for doubt. Alan Tobin was sentenced to 20 years, and John Tobin was sentenced to 19 years and 8 months. The bear, Robbie Broughton, served time for laundering and enforcement activity. Dozens of others followed, from drivers to safe house operators. Each played a part. Each received their due. The judge called it a business on a national scale. He wasn't exaggerating. The Tobins had operated like a corporation, with code names, encrypted devices, and controlled distribution lines. But like all empires built on silence and fear, it had an expiration date. And for Alan, the fall from grace was steep. A nurse who once cared for the vulnerable now sat behind bulletproof glass. For John, whose fingerprints had never been found on a single drug shipment, it was logistics that damned him. Routes, bubble wrap, burner phones. Justice had been served. But the story didn't end in that courtroom, because somewhere out there others had watched this fall and learned from it. If you're ready for another twisted tale, click on the True Crime playlist on your screen now, because it is packed with stories that will make you question everything.